Hi all, welcome to NiCHE Conversations. It is episode 12 of season 4, and today we are going to be not heading up there, but talking about the Yukon, and we're going to be looking at Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in territory. Emily, our guest, is already here, so I'm going to invite her in. Hello, Emily.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
You as well. Welcome to NiCHE Conversations. I am Jessica DeWitt, one of the editors here at the network in Canadian History and Environment. And today we are joined by Emily Witherow. Will you tell us more about yourself?
Sure. Very happy to be here today. So my name is Emily. I'm currently a third-year master's student at UBC. I'm working under Tina Liu, and I'm doing research on free entry mining legislation and the language of waste, essentially. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like good stuff. And slightly connected to what we're talking about today, back in November, we published a piece called Storing Tr'ondëk Klondike, Disrupting Settler Colonial Narratives Through UNESCO Designation. And we asked you, we really wanted someone to contextualize this new World Heritage Site in Yukon. So I thought to begin with, we kind of start kind of broad and talk about, what does UNESCO World Heritage Site status, like what does the designation mean generally? And then more specifically, what does it mean for Tr'ondëk Klondike?
For sure. So UNESCO is an agency of the UN, and it essentially works to encourage international cooperation in the conservation of cultural and natural heritage sites. So it does so in part by designating World Heritage Sites, which are essentially landmarks that have cultural or natural importance to the international community as a whole. It's not just the home country. And so a designation essentially means that a site has demonstrated outstanding universal value, which means that it's an example of human creativity, technological development, inspiring natural phenomena, anything of that kind of nature. And so for, what it means for Tr'ondëk Klondike specifically, it means that this site has demonstrated that outstanding universal value in attesting to the effects of colonialism over the period of the gold rush, but starting a couple of decades before as well. Legally, not much changes. The management of the site remains more or less the same. But on the other hand, with the designation, Canada really has made a commitment to preserve the sites in perpetuity, which is really fantastic. So, yeah, I think in terms of what this means for Tr'ondëk Klondike, most realistically, it really does mean that they have this UNESCO brand to advertise with and hopefully to draw more tourists up north with. And so, tourism accounts for proportionally a much higher percentage of the Yukon's GDP.
Yeah.
And there's been a huge reduction in visitors since COVID. So that's the hope with UNESCO.
Yeah. I always find that interesting because like these labels that we give these places, like UNESCO's heritage status or a national park or what have you, both like protects it and like ensures that more people will go there. It's like
Absolutely.
this interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of tension between heritage designations and tourism. There's a lot of questions around management, protection, and there are some downsides, right? So
Absolutely.
the downsides would be lack of funding, congestion, and site degradation, seasonal variations, things like that. Things that I would say that the Yukon and Dawson City already experiences as well, because they're so reliant on tourism. The revival of Dawson City in the 1950s and 60s was really based in heritage tourism. So, yeah.
Okay, so how does this successful UNESCO nomination, which you write was submitted in 2021, center Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in perspectives in the region's history?
Yeah, well, the typical story of the gold rush is this quintessential frontier story, and I feel like we've all heard it. It features pioneers in this wilderness, and they eke out a civilization overnight. And this is always narrated from the perspectives of outsiders, sometimes even outsiders to the rush itself, like poet Robert Service, who never participated in the gold rush. And this is the story that's been commemorated and entombed in Dawson City. And so instead, this narrative kind of takes a step away and uses these 8 connected properties to center Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and Indigenous experiences and adaptations to colonialism. And so each site essentially highlights an episode of interaction between Indigenous peoples and newcomers. And it's really cool to look at from a historic perspective, but also from a tourist perspective. You know, we can see a transition from more egalitarian fur trading relationships at Fort Reliance in 1874 to increasing marginalization with the growth of mining. We have mining towns like 40 Mile popping up. And then we can see like outright dispossession and disenfranchisement when we look at Tr'ondëk, which is an ancestral fishing camp that's located just across the river from Dawson City that was essentially overrun by miners at the start of the gold rush. And we now know it as, Klondike City or Loustown. And, I think as a historian looking at sources, it's also really important to remember that the authenticity of this site is actually founded in Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in oral history, stories, place names, cosmologies. And so it's not just colonial archival documentary records that we're relying on. And this nomination, I think, really is rooted to place through those sources and through that perspective. I think it actually, it's a very successful nomination in centering Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in experiences in that way.
Yeah, you kind of wrote that this isn't like the first time that they tried to get the status. And I know here in Saskatoon, Wanaskewin, which is just north of the city, has been trying to get UNESCO World Heritage Site status for as long as I've been familiar with it, so over a decade now, and it's not an easy process. And yeah, understanding how this is different from other earlier sites that have been designated as well, that perhaps are Indigenous sites that rely more on colonial narratives. I think you make that pretty clear in your piece. So lastly, you have this one passage that I really enjoyed, and here's just an excerpt from it. And I thought maybe I'd ask you to expand upon it a little bit. And you write that that this site forces us to consider more deeply how to balance the preservation of cultural heritage and the development of natural resources. And yeah, what do you mean by this force?
Yeah, no, as an outsider, and I'm speaking as a Southern Canadian resident, I think that when we look at the Yukon, we can see an incompatibility between the spirit and the intent of heritage preservation compared to free entry mining legislation. Maybe as a bit of background, free entry is this principle that prospectors and companies can enter, stake claims, prospect, and mine any land that isn't expressly withdrawn, without the need to inform property owners or Indigenous nations. And so this is the principle that's really foundational to the Yukon's Quartz and Placer mining acts, which have gone virtually unchanged since 1906 as well. And let me tell you, this separation between subsurface and surface property is so fascinating to me, because in what worldview does it make sense to separate two such entangled places? And, what social priorities does it reveal? And, a lot of historians and lawyers have found and shown that free entry really does hold mining as the highest and best use of land. And, it encourages mining legislation at any cost, including a cost to heritage sites. Like I didn't include this, and I didn't have a chance to include this in the article, but several UNESCO component sites have actually faced encroachment from mining activities over the last 20 or 30 years. In 2016, Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in actually sued the Yukon government for mining exploration on Tr'ondëk, which was already designated as a national heritage site. And then we also have several grandfathered mining claims in the Yukon and the municipality of Dawson City specifically. And Dawson City is one of those 8 component sites of the designation, like the Slinky mine, that have actually caused a lot of debate between residents who woke up one day and suddenly there's a mine in their backyard, right?
Yeah.
And so we think what this designation does is it forces us to ask questions about how to balance these two land uses, how to diversify the benefits of mining, address the downsides. But to me, I think most importantly, it shows two different visions of what the Yukon's future looks like. How should we use the land? So yeah, it's fascinating to look into the difficulties, the struggles of this nomination, because just like in your community, this nomination has taken forever. This has been on the table for at least 20 years,
yeah.
right? So balancing these debates, I think, really shows the power of the mining lobby in these communities to be given equal voice with municipalities and First Nations about land use. I think is something pretty stunning. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that in the piece.
Yeah. I really love that, and that you're bringing it into the future and really highlighting how heritage is today. You know, like it's not a past thing. And I think a lot of like the romanticization of Klondike mining is this idea that it happened in the past and it's not still a very huge force on the land and in the lives of the people and the more the humans that are there right now. And kind of this heritage designation is acknowledging that and kind of tying it together and moving it forward. I see it as kind of the way you're describing it as a way of moving forward with the realities, right?
Yeah.
With a better, like more full understanding of the past and the present.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
cool.
I think you know, just to add to that understanding of the gold rush is over. There's a lot of news coming out right now about this rush for critical minerals in Canada's Arctic and northern parts of the provinces. Yeah. It's labeled as a second gold rush. And I think what I'm trying to argue essentially is that the gold rush never ended. You know, this mining legislation really has ensured continuity. So yeah, I think it's important for other people to know that and to change the way that we think of the Yukon. It's not just a resource frontier, it's a homeland, and it should be recognized as such.
Brilliant. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think everyone should read this piece. It's really informative, and it made me want to like seek out and learn more about the other UNESCO World Heritage Sites in our country and elsewhere as well, and kind of see, I'm sure there's probably some good histories out there of like the way that has changed through time and stuff. But anyways, it's a very fascinating topic, and I'm really glad that you wrote for us, because we really wanted someone to be able to contextualize this, because this is a major development, particularly for Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in. So yeah, thank you for joining me today, Emily. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye now.